So we're celebrating this week, coming up to the 125th birth celebration of Srila Prabhupada. As we all know, Prabhupada appeared in Calcutta in 1896. And by studying all of the different references available to us in books, on tapes, Prabhupada's conversations with his devotees and his godbrothers, we were able to compile something about Prabhupada's youth in Prabhupada's own words. These are some of his memories of when he lived in Calcutta. He was in Calcutta up until 1928, so that's nearly more than 30 years that he was living there. And we'll hear now, this picture is Srila Prabhupada in 1976 when he brought some devotees to the temple where he used to worship Radha Govinda as a child. From the time before he could even walk, he was brought by baby carriage for darshan to Radha Govinda ji, who he called Thakur Bari. And hour after hour, Prabhupada would watch how the pujari was worshiping the deity, how the festivals were being performed. And he was inspired. This was the inspiration from the beginning of his life, how he would worship Radha and Krishna and perform all of the festivals that he brought to ISKCON when he established the society. So we'll hear now about Prabhupada's wonderful pastimes in Calcutta from his own mouth. I was born in 1896. I shall say practically from my own life, I was fortunate to get my birth in a very pious family. Yes, my father was a very pious man, and I wanted to imitate him in my childhood. Of course, our family was not very poor, but we were not very rich men. But my father was a very pious man. He was worshiping Krishna. So I, in my childhood, when I was 5 or 6 years old, I requested my father, "Father, give me this deity, I shall worship." So Father purchased for me little Krishna, Radha, and he gave me, and I was imitating. Whatever foodstuff I was getting, I was offering to Krishna and eating. Everything, complete. I would perform arti and offer prasadam, Radha Govinda deities. There was altar decorated, small deity, daily changing cloth, offering obeisances, everything. In this way, I got my life developed. This is the picture of the little deities that his father purchased for him, Radha Govinda. He named them after the deities that he was having darshan of at the Mulek's temple. By the grace of Lord Sri Krishna, we had the chance of being born in a Vaishnava family. Our father encouraged us in all respects to observe all functions such as Rath Yatra and Dol Yatra ceremonies. And he used to spend money liberally for distributing prasadam to us children and our friends. Our spiritual master, who also took his birth in a Vaishnava family, got all inspiration from his great Vaishnava father, Thakur Bhakti Vinod. That is the way of all lucky Vaishnava families. And there was a temple in our neighborhood, so I was seeing the Krishna deity. Oh, I was thinking many things. I still remember. I was standing for hours together. So in this way, practically, we can understand that these facilities are given by the Lord. The Lord is always prepared to give us facility. Simply, he wants to see that we are sincere, that's all. So when Srila Prabhupada established ISKCON, because his disciples were the first generation, his children, he explained that the children of our children will be pure devotees. And how that happens is, we've learned from Prabhupada Then we teach our children become established in this Krishna consciousness, and then their children, after the 2 generations, they'll become the pure devotees. In a playful manner, I used to worship these deities along with my sister. Later on, these activities were suspended due to my association in the schools and colleges, and I became completely out of practice. But in my youthful days, when I met my spiritual master, Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, again I revived my old habit, and the same playful deities became my worshipful deities in proper regulation. This was followed up until I left the family connection, and I am pleased that my generous father gave the first impression, which was developed later into regulative devotional service by his divine grace. This is a later picture of Srila Prabhupada's sister. Srila Prabhupada's sister was so attached to Srila Prabhupada, and this was from their very birth. So whatever he did, she would follow. And when he left Calcutta and wasn't worshiping Radha Govinda deities anymore, they're just about this big, he gave them to who we call Pishima. Pishima was initiated by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Harinam Diksha, but she was married at a very young age, at about 9 years old. Her husband's name was Rasabihari. And unfortunately, he wasn't strictly vegetarian. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wouldn't give her a second initiation, because naturally in the home she had to serve her husband. She had 9 children by him. And then he unfortunately left this world. But before he left this world, she made him into a devotee. He was a practicing devotee. And then after he left the world, she looked after her children. We went to her house once. We had darshan of little Radha Govindaji. Still to that day, she was worshiping Radha Govinda, offering all of the prasadam. Her whole family was centered around the Radha Govindaji deities. And then when Prabhupada left this world, this picture is when Prabhupada, after he entered Samadhi, he's sitting there on the Vyasasana. Pishima was right there. She couldn't bear his separation. So she very soon after also gave up her body. She couldn't live without her big brother. Prabhupada left in, as we know, November 14th, 1977. So Pishima gave up her family. She went to live at our temple in Mayapur. She brought Radha Govindaji with her and put them on the altar with Radha Madhava. They were worshipped there. At that time, we only had small Radha Madhava. And she gave up her body there in Mayapur on the Bengali New Year's, just 15 days after Gaur Purnima of the very next year. She had to follow her big brother. Very devoted to Srila Prabhupada. Wherever he went in India, she would follow him to serve him and cook for him. So that's Pishima. Bhagavad-Gita 6:42. He takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Verily, such a birth is rare in this world. So fortunately, we had the opportunity of getting such a father. So we are imitating our father. In my childhood, I imitated my father. In my maternal uncle's house, I was called Nanda Dulal, or Nandu. That's because Srila Prabhupada was born on the day of Nanda Mahotsava, the day after Janmashtami, at his maternal home. Because the custom is that the mother goes to the home of her family to give birth. I lost my mother when I was only 14 years old, so I didn't get much of my mother's affection in my childhood. But in my old age, Krishna has given me so many young mothers to take care of me. Prabhupada would call his early disciples his mothers because they looked after Prabhupada so lovingly. My mother used to prepare very nice food, We were glad in that way. Nice paratha, nice vegetable, achar, so many things she used to prepare. Always preparing some food, puffed rice. I remember that even for going to the privy, I wanted permission of my mother. Can I go? That is nature. Mother is not restricting me. Still, I'm asking the permission of mother. Can I go? Can I go? I remember it. This is natural. Similarly, we cannot do anything without the permission of the super soul within the heart. Now, this puffed rice, of course, they used to make their own puffed rice. Picture. They make their own puffed rice, of course. And they have the special clay pots and the rice falls through in the bottom. So they wouldn't buy from outside. Sometimes I used to cook. I asked my mother, I'll do this, that. They allowed, all right. Somebody's doing some artistic work. I'll stand. I'll see how they are doing. From my childhood, it is my nature. If somebody is preparing, I see it. Just like knitting. I learned knitting by standing before. They're making some flower of wool, so I'll learn it. So Srila Prabhupada explained to us that intelligence is when you learn just by observing. And we had that example with Pishima, because Pishima could only speak Bengali, and when she came here, she needed an assistant to learn to help her with cooking for Prabhupada. And she had me as her assistant, and everything I learned just by watching her. Watching, no speaking whatsoever because we couldn't communicate. By watching her, finally Prabhupada was satisfied. He told Pishima to rest and then had me cook for him. So this observation, we don't need so many questions, we don't need so many teachers and classrooms and courses and fees. Just by watching, we can learn so many things. And similarly, I learned how to worship Radha Krishna. I'll decorate. I'll keep it in a place. Whatever I eat, I offer. I imitate ghee lamb, arti. We had the opportunity of seeing this Radha Govinda from very childhood. When I was 3 or 4 years old, I used to visit this Radha Govinda daily. That's the Thakurbadi temple. Before he got his, this is a picture of his little Radha Govinda deities. And that is the inspiration of my devotional life. That deity is still existing. I have given to my sister. Then I introduced Rath Yatra. My Rath Yatra was being performed very gloriously. My father used to spend money. In those days, 10 rupees, 20 rupees was sufficient. I hired one kirtan party, and with small friends we performed this Rath Yatra ceremony. According to our children's imagination, it was very gorgeous. Therefore, this Krishna consciousness should be taught from the very beginning of life. The more younger you capture it, just like we were educated from the very birth by our father. That's why Srila Prabhupada was very anxious to establish the Gurukula program. And that first Gurukula in Dallas, all the children from around the society, all over the temples, even from abroad, they were sent there to Dallas. And from a very young age, some of the children were just 3.5 years old. They learned all about Krishna consciousness, and that stayed with them their whole life. They were all my childhood playmates. Their older brothers, the eldest one was my very, very intimate friend, Siddheshwar Mullik. We used to ride on the same perambulator when we were 3, 4 years old. And Rath Yatra ceremony was performed with all these guests. In our neighborhood, there were 4 or 5 houses, all the children of the same age. I was the leader. Yes, I organized this Rath Yatra. A small rath the father gave made of nice strong wood. There was procession of my small children friends. 8 days, 8 kinds of varieties of prasadam my mother would prepare. I was performing Radhastami, Janmastami, and learning how to dress Radha Govinda. Yes. So, Siddheshwar Malik, the Malik family, the Malik name is a title that was given by the Mohammedans to big zamindars and babus who were very successful. But actually there are two families, and that's the Day family and the Seal family. They're Suvarna Vaishyas. They're big merchants, very wealthy people. So Prabhupada was a part of that family, and the Malik name was given to members of that family who were very, very wealthy. We had the opportunity of being trained up by our parents like this. Many saintly persons used to visit my father's house. My father was Vaishnava, and he wanted me to become a Vaishnava. Whenever some saintly person would come, he would ask him, "Please bless my son that he can become a servant of Radharani." That was his prayer. He never prayed for anything, and he gave me education how to play mridanga. My mother was against it. There were two teachers, one for teaching me ABCD and one for teaching me mridanga. One teacher was waiting, and the other teacher was teaching me how to play on mridanga. My mother would be angry. "What is this nonsense? You're teaching mridanga? What he will do with mridanga?" But perhaps my father wanted that I should be a great mridanga player in the future. Therefore, I am very much indebted to my father, and I have dedicated my book, Krishna book, to him. He wanted me to be preacher of Bhagavat, Srimad Bhagavatam, and player of mridanga, and to become servant of Radharani. So Srila Prabhupada, when he was a child, from the age of 5 to 8, he had tutors at his home. His parents didn't send him to school. So the two teachers were one for mridanga, and the other was for the academic studies. The academic studies teachers he had to wait until the mridanga class was over. Then when he was 8 years old, his father arranged for him to go to the Motilal Seal school. Again, that's one of the families of the Malik group, Seal, very wealthy gentlemen who did philanthropic work by opening schools for the Vaishnav families. That was from age 8. We have our family deity, Damodar. That was his father's deity. In my childhood, I was worshipping Radha Krishna deities, and then fortunately, I got my Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So this was a good fortune. From the very beginning, we were trained up. So in the beginning of our life, I was worshipping Radha Krishna and playing with Rath Yatra. The same thing is being done now in a larger scale. There is no change. So from Srila Prabhupada's little Rath Yatra when he was age 5 and 6, now we have the pinnacle of Prabhupada's success. This is in 1976 when 3 carts went down 5th Avenue of New York City, and in the background you can see the Empire State Building. Gopeshwar Malik was my father's friend. He was criticizing my father that you were performing Rath Yatra ceremony and you're not inviting us? So my father said, "That is children's play. What shall I invite you? You're a very big man." So, "Oh, you are avoiding. In the name of children, you are avoiding us." On the whole, this Rath Yatra festival was very gorgeously. Then imitating me, my brother, he also introduced Rath Yatra. So all of them introduced Rath Yatra, and the destination was this Thakur Bari from there. So practically, what I'm doing now, the same thing. Radha Krishna worship and introduction of Rath Yatra. I'm not doing anything else. You know very well. We are now performing Rath Yatra ceremony practically in all big cities of the world. Now this is the place where the first Rath Yatra was performed outside of India. It wasn't so big the first time in 1967, but now we have gigantic Rath Yatra in Golden Gate Parkway. Last year, for the first time, actually It's a city holiday, Rath Yatra Day, that was established by the mayor of the city of San Francisco, because the Rath Yatra is so huge that up to 10,000 people attend this Rath Yatra. So we just got news that this year they allowed the Rath Yatra to be performed despite the epidemic. And it's gigantic. So the same thing, the same Radha Krishna worship temples and same Rath Yatra in bigger scale. But the same thing was begun as play from this quarter, this Thakur Bari. So this is a picture of the Thakur Bari, Radha Govindaji, where Prabhupada got his inspiration. I began, I think, from 1904 or 5, from my very childhood. So anyway, this Thakur Bari, Radha Govindaji, is my life. That is the beginning of my spiritual life. And after so many years, still Radha Govindaji has dragged me. So it is his kindness. So the beginning was the same thing. Worship of Radha Krishna deity and introduction of Rath Yatra. That is, I am doing in a bigger scale and a wider scale all over the world. So it is nothing new. About this movement, it may be this Radha Krishna, Radha Govinda deity is the inspiration. So you are all fortunate that you have come here. So let us offer our obeisances. This is my inspiration, this deity. So Radha Govindaji, Prabhupada spoke this when he had brought the devotees to take darshan of Radha Govindaji in 1976. But when Prabhupada established the deities in New York, he named them Radha Govindaji. And when Prabhupada established the deities at our ISKCON temple, 3 Albert Road in Calcutta, he also named them Radha Govindaji. So Radha Govindaji was very dear to his heart. And the two principal places, first where he started in America, in New York, and where he started also in India, they were also Radha Govindaji. And at times before Prabhupada established the name Radha Shyam Sundar here, he would also call the deities Radha Govinda. I was given the opportunity to take birth in that family, Krishna Association, and my father was a great Vaishnava. Both things were confirmed. My father was Suchi, and although I did not belong to that family, I was born in that aristocratic family and I was raised amongst them. So that confirms this Krishna consciousness is coming from previous life. And some very authorized astrologers said that in my previous life, I was a physician and I did not commit any sinful act. The only, if it is taken as sinful, I killed some snakes for medicinal purpose. Otherwise, I did not commit any sin. And it is right, because I had tendency in my childhood play to imitate the physician. I would keep some medicine, and my playmates would come, I would feel their pulse, and give some medicine. This was my play, I remember. Yes, some powders. Very small child at that time. So I would play that my playmates would come as patients, they would stand, I would give them some medicine. Hansaduta says, and still you're giving medicine. Prabhupada, yes, I was giving medicine in business. I was appointed Dr. Bosa's laboratory manager. Hansaduta, but still you're giving medicine. You're giving Krishna medicine. Prabhupada, yes, I know how to prepare so many medicines still. Practically all allopathic medicine I can prepare. Ayurvedic also, some of. What is that they are written in the book, I can prepare. So that confirms my previous life also. Prabhupada had a very close friend in Allahabad, his name was Dr. Ghosh. And he asked Prabhupada once, I want to know if you have the tonic for this bhava rog. Bhava rog means the samsara, birth and death. And Prabhupada, he said that, yes, I have it. You take it. Harinam. When I was 1.5 years old, I suffered from typhoid. And Dr. Kartik Chandra Bose said, please give him chicken juice. My father refused. No, we cannot. No, he has to be given. Now he has become very weak. No, I cannot allow. It is necessary, don't mind. I shall prepare in my own house and send. My father thought it was essential, so it was sent from his house. And when it was given to me, immediately I began to vomit. And my father threw it away. And when the doctor asked that this was no, then don't bother. This story I heard. This allopathic system of medicine introduced all these things in India. Otherwise, they did not know. So Dr. Kartik Chandra Bose, he was a famous chemist, and we'll hear later how he engaged Prabhupada in that chemical business. And it was he, along with one of his relatives, who established the Bengal Chemical Company, which is still very famous. So they were somewhat influenced by the allopathic or the Western medicines, and that's why they established this company. I have seen also, I remember in Calcutta, there was a very virulent type of plague epidemic in 1898. Calcutta became devastated. All people practically left Calcutta. Daily, hundreds and hundreds of people were dying. I was 1 year old, or 1.5 years old. I have seen what was happening, but there was plague epidemic. That I did not know. Later on, I heard from my parents. So one Babaji, he organized Sankirtan, Hare Krishna Sankirtan. When there was no other way, he organized Sankirtan all over Calcutta. And in Sankirtan, all people, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Parsi, everyone joined. And they were going road to road, street to street, entering in every house. So at Mahatma Gandhi Road, 151, we received the Sankirtan party very nicely. There was light, and I was very small. I was also dancing, I can remember, just like our small children sometimes dance. I could see only up to the knees of the persons who were joined. Then the plague subsided. This is a fact. Everyone who knows the history of Calcutta, the plague was subsided by Sankirtan movement. So Prabhupada has a few other memories of this plague. This plague was the bubonic plague. It's caused by the fleas on rats. So the Calcutta municipality, they made a rule that anyone who can give a dead rat, they would give 5 paisa for that dead rat, so that they could get rid of the rats. So one young boy, he found a dead rat, he gave it, he got his 5 paisa. He took that 5 paisa, he bought some old betel nuts, he cut out the bad parts, he sold the betel nuts, he made 10 paisa, he kept doing more and more and more, and he became the wealthiest betel nut seller in Calcutta. So although we couldn't give all the memories at this time, Prabhupada had so many different memories of his childhood like that. Of course, we do not recommend that Sankirtan should be used for some material purpose. That is nam aparad. You can utilize Sankirtan for some material purpose, but that is not allowed. That is nam aparad, because nam, the holy name of Krishna, and Krishna, they are identical. You cannot utilize Krishna for your personal material benefit. That is aparad. Krishna is the Lord. You cannot engage the Lord for your service. Similarly, you cannot utilize the holy name of the Lord for some material purpose. That is not allowed. And then Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad-Gita 4:11. All of them, as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Prita. If you want some material benefit by chanting Hare Krishna mantra, you'll get it, but that is nam aparad. You won't get the ecstasy of loving God. That is the aim of chanting Hare Krishna mantra. how you shall elevate yourself to the platform of loving God. That is required. So Prabhupada spoke this in reference to the Babaji who, he made the Harinam Sankirtan all over Calcutta, and the plague subsided. But then Prabhupada explains that we're not to use the holy name for such material purposes, because then you don't get the real benefit of chanting the holy name, which is the ecstasy of loving God. My father was very much affectionate, and whatever I wanted from my father, he would at once give me. One time he purchased for me one rifle, and so after taking it, I demanded that he must give me another. My father denied. "You already have one. Why do you ask me for another?" So my argument was that I must have 2 rifles, one for each hand. Due to my obstinacy, my father finally agreed. Later on, when I was young and lost my father, I was very sorry to have lost such affectionate father. But by Krishna's grace, I have now many American fathers and mothers. So I am appealing to all of my American fathers and mothers to help me by this contribution. So Prabhupada would often speak like this in the early days. He explained that he had given up his whole family. He gave up 5 children. Now he has 5,000 children. He lost his parents at a young age, but now he has so many fathers and mothers who are taking care of him so nicely in the Western country. It was just to encourage us. When I was a boy of 8 or 10 years, sometimes I used to accompany my father. He would take prasadam from the temple. We paid for 2 dishes, 4 annas. 4 annas, that's 25 paisa, means according to modern exchange, it is 5 cents only. For 5 cents, very nice prasadam we can get. 2 persons we were fed. India knows how to eat. I have traveled all over the world, and this is my experience. Nobody knows how to eat, only India. I know in our childhood days, there was biggest propaganda for drinking tea. Otherwise, Indians did not know how to drink tea. Smoking cigarettes, these were taught to them. This drinking of tea was unknown to any family. Smoking or intoxicating, we never learned it from our childhood, from our birth. So this is all propaganda that was started by the tea merchants, because the English, they had a habit of drinking tea. So they started big tea estates here in India. The weather was proper for that. And they wanted to make the Indian people to become addicted to tea drinking as well, because that would increase their business. So they set up tea set committees. And all over India, they set up these committees. They would hand out free tea. And you know, if you drink tea, if you drink enough tea, you become addicted to it because it's an intoxicant. So in that way, now you'll see most of the Indian population is addicted to tea because of this propaganda that was started by the English. Before that, nobody drank tea in India. In mango season, my father used to purchase a full basket. In India, they are sold in baskets. They were very cheap in those days. 3 rupees, a big basket, at least containing more than 100 mangoes. First-class mangoes. Otherwise, 1 rupee, 2 rupees. So in our childhood, we take each mango, and while playing, we were eating like this, in this way. I remember I was traveling with my father, and he gave me a big mango. At that time, I was small, so all sides had become moist with mango juice. And when it is dried up, I was feeling so much inconvenience, but there was no water. Finally, I knew how to undo it. I remember that precarious time. So this is Prabhupada remembering his, just like you get flashbacks of your childhood, and Prabhupada would remember these times with his father. My father was a businessman. Although we were living the most aristocratic family, my father was middle class. In those days, about 500 rupees income, that's per month. It was not very much, But 70 years ago, 500 rupees means nowadays 20 times. We were purchasing at that time rice. My father had hobby. There must be full stock of rice at least for 6 months. Rice and fuel and ghee and potato he would stock. So we had no difficulties. Everything was sumptuous by Father's plan. In our childhood, we were taught by our parents, if there is small grain and if it's stuck on the feet, at the bottom of your feet, we shall pick it up and touch on the forehead. We are taught like this, how to see everything in relation with Krishna. That is Krishna conscious. We cannot therefore see anything wasted, anything misused. Why you are preaching, why we are after so many rascals, that his life is being misused. Let him give some enlightenment. This is our mission. Or let him go to hell. In other words, Prabhupada was saying all these people that we're preaching to, they belong to Krishna. So they should also be offered to Krishna. This was our training. The idea behind that the grain of rice is not man-made. It is sent by God. Oh God, give us our daily bread. So here is the bread. It is God's mercy. Just see how great idea. What is given by God, that is also God. This is God consciousness. You're asking God's mercy. So God's mercy is also God, the absolute. So how can you disrespect a thing which is given by God? You cannot produce rice. You cannot produce bread. It is given by God, everything. And this is why Prabhupada was very, very careful that the devotees didn't waste any prasadam. One time, just by accident, I was, after cooking for Prabhupada each day, when there were remnants, Pishima would sit down, I'd put a leaf plate for her and serve her the remnants. And I gave her a little bit too much. And she got so upset with me. Prabhupada walked in the room. He was so angry with me. We have to be very careful never to give more on a person's plate than what they can eat, because we should never waste even 1 grain of rice or anything, because all of that is non-different from Krishna. And therefore, Prabhupada, even here in Vrindavan, we saw, Prabhupada came into his kitchen one day, and he saw that the plates of the GBCs and his secretary, there was unfinished prasadam on the plate. And he asked, what is this? And he immediately went to the room of the GBC, who was Brahmananda, and he chastised Brahmananda that, why are you wasting prasadam? And Brahmananda gave the reasoning that, well, Prabhupada, I burped. I thought that after you burp, you're not supposed to eat any more prasadam. And Prabhupada said, no. Before you start, you look at what you have on your plate, and whatever you think you can't eat, you take off your plate before you start, and that way it's not contaminated. And anything that's on your plate, you have to finish every single grain. So we should practice this when we're taking prasadam. Not even a single grain should be wasted, because that's non-different from Krishna. My father used to go to a vegetable vendor. He has got a big basket, and he'll say, what do you want for all? The whole basket. So he is ready. The man is ready. He is ready because he'll sit down so long, so at very cheap rate, he'll give it. And it was not required in the family so much. My mother became very angry that you're bringing so much vegetable. It is being spoiled. But he would purchase like that. If you give him in those days 50 rupees to go to the market, he will spend all the money and bring it home. So Prabhupada had that same habit. When he would go on his morning walks, because in those days, Chattikara Road was just about this wide. It was wide enough for a tanga, that's all, 1 tanga, to go from Chattikara to Vrindavan. So naturally, all of the farmers who lived outside of Vrindavan area, because the Sabji Mandi was here in Loy Bazaar, They would be coming in the early morning when Prabhupada was taking his morning walk with all their vegetables. They would come on their bullock carts, on their bicycles, and Prabhupada would be taking his morning walk as they were coming into the town. So he would stop them, and he would do the same thing with them. He said, "How much for everything that you have?" You see the bags here, this is sabji. And he would make a very low price. And the man, of course, if he didn't have to sit there all day and try to sell his sabjis, he was so happy. So he would sell it all to Prabhupada. It's such a small amount. You see here, the Lokanath Swami is here in this picture somewhere. So Prabhupada would have a good time on his morning walks bargaining with the sabji wallas. Formerly, we have seen a currency. They will see, these currencies were printed or made by the East India Company. And they were made of gold or silver, whatever. They were pure. It wasn't mixed like you get now. Formerly, we have seen currency. They will offer, what do you want? Gold, silver, or currency? These three things were offered. If you want gold coins, take gold coins. If you want silver coins, take silver. And if you want currency, you take. Currency was paper money. You could purchase. In our family, or every family, they used to purchase gold from the currency and melt it and make ornaments. There was no restriction. It was called guinea gold. Gold was purchased and sold as you like. Where is that gold now? So even now, it used to be on the rupee notes, or any notes, it says you could trade it in for the amount, but now all they do is they print the paper. It's not even paper anymore, they print the plastic, and there's no gold or silver to back it up in the reserve. It's just paper. So it wasn't like that then. You could actually get gold for the money that you had. How opulent we were. At least there was no question of need. We were receiving daily 4 or 5 guests, and my father was functioning so many festivals. He gave in marriage 4 daughters. There was no difficulty. The income was not more than 250 rupees. Of course, that 250 rupees at least 10 times now, but still there was no need. Not very opulent, but there was no need. The first necessity is to feed and to clothe. May not be very luxurious life, but there was no scarcity for food and shelter or cloth. So these 2 things are very important to remember as we read on. That the first necessities are food and cloth, because the British took advantage of that later. In our childhood, these tomatoes were called foreign eggplant, bilati begun. And because it was foreign, nobody will touch it. In our childhood, we never eat the tomato. It was rejected by the whole Indian Hindu culture. It was imported. Because it was imported, they would not touch. These milk cloth, because they were imported, no gentleman will touch. No religious function would allow to use mill-made cloth. And so far medicine is concerned, they would never touch it. That's allopathic medicine. So it's true that the tomato, spinach, and eggplant, even by botany, they're all in the same nightshade family, also potato. So you'll see in some of the temples, they have restrictions. And those, like in Jagannath temple, so many restrictions. They don't offer to Lord Jagannath. So many of the vegetables that are now available, they didn't exist in that time. So tomato was one of those, because the tomato was brought by the foreigners. Bilati. Bilati means foreign. So, and it was like begun. So they wouldn't eat it. But now, after course of time, these things are accepted. They're also grown here in India. So sometimes the devotees, they give objection that, look, in no other temples they're offering carrot, no other temples are offering this, that, the other thing. Why are you offering in your temple? But we have to remember that Srila Prabhupada was so ingenious. When he went to the West, first of all, no one else went to the West to preach. No one was so compassionate. But there are completely other vegetables and fruits in the Western countries. When we came here to India, we never saw the fruits and vegetables that you have here. So in the West, there are also fruits and vegetables. And Krishna says, you offer me a fruit, a flower, you offer me vegetables or just unripe fruits. So Prabhupada, he allowed these things to be offered to the deities because that's what was available in the Western countries. He was extremely broad-minded. So in his temples, tomato is offered, all these other things are offered that might not be offered in other temples. But we have to remember the broad-minded intelligence of Srila Prabhupada, how he engaged everything in Krishna's service in his temples. We were observing the gramophone box, how it can speak without a man. There must be a man within, and that within the box there is some man who's singing. So this is the beginning of audio. This is the first type of course, nowadays we have so many advanced things, but this is called a gramophone. There's a handle. You would wind the handle, and the needle would go around on the record. Even in our childhood, we only had these record players, that's all. No, of course, there were no computers. So the little children, they thought that inside of that box there must be a little man singing. An electric fan. I was thinking, there must be some ghost, because how can something move without, there was no electricity. It was all done by kerosene or by hand winding. There must be some ghost. Yes, these kind of suggestion. We used to worship Saraswati. Please, Mother, give me past this examination. That was our prayer. We had to study that small book, Chanaka Sloka. So these are just Prabhupada, him reminiscing his childhood. All these little things, we tried to collect them together. I do not want to go to school. I am forced to go to school. Yes, at least I was like that. I never wanted to go to school. And my father was very kind. All right, why are you not going to school? I would say, I will go tomorrow. All right. But my mother was very careful. Perhaps if my mother would not have been a little strict, I would have not gotten any education. My father was very lenient, so she used to force me. One man would take me to school. Actually, children do not want to go to school. They want to play. Against the will of the child, he has to go to school. Then there is examination, not only going to school. So you study the life. From the beginning of this body within the womb of the mother, it is simply troublesome. Against my will, so many distresses are there. Then as you grow, the distresses grow. Distress is not diminished. Janma, then old age, then disease. The trees, plants, they are standing. That is very great punishment. Those who are very, very sinful, they have to take birth as trees and plants and stand up for thousands of years. Material nature's punishment. A small ant, it can move, but a big tree cannot move. That is punishment. Just like in our childhood, we were being punished by the teachers. Stand up on the bench. So it is like that. Any of you ever had that punishment in your classes? That's the punishment. You have to stand up like a tree. I remember 2 teachers. We were so afraid we would go 50 miles away to avoid them. So, again, if you go here in India, there's deforestation. But if you go to other countries, there are hundreds of times more trees than human beings. Here it's just the other way around because it's a very pious country. There's so many human beings here because it's a pious birth, to take birth in India. But if you go to other countries in Eastern Europe, different places like that, All you see is trees. Everywhere, trees and trees and trees. Because these people, these living entities are all being punished, having to stand in the bitter cold as trees in the rain. And that's punishment by material nature, to have to take tree birth. I used to read Mahabharata before my grandmother. In the afternoon, after taking rest, she would call me and ask me to recite Mahabharata. So we learned Mahabharata in association with grandmother from the childhood. Ladies, especially those coming from respectable families, could not be seen by ordinary men. This system is still current in remote places. The Sanskrit word asurya pashya indicates that a respectable lady could not be seen even by the sun. In the Oriental culture, this system was very prevalent and was strictly observed by respectable ladies, both Hindu and Muslim. We have actual experience in our childhood that our mother would not walk even next door to observe an invitation. Rather, she would go in either a carriage or a palanquin carried by 4 men. So even 40, 50 years ago here in Vrindavan, when there were no cars here, nothing, we only had a few rickshaws here. And those rickshaws, you would get in the rickshaws, and on all sides there would be curtains. We'd be able to put all the curtains down so nobody would see us even when we were riding in the rickshaws. So this is just the culture. The parda, Prabhupada says that the woman covering their face, that's not Hindu. That comes from the Muslims. But going out like this, being covered in a carriage or a palanquin, that was followed by everybody. When we were 5 or 6 years old, we used to go to our maternal uncle's house in the suburbs of Calcutta. All the ladies and members of the house would go to a place where Bhagavad-Gita is being discussed. They will sit down, all the neighboring people, they will come, very big crowd, and they will hear. And whatever they can pay, they will pay. And with that impression, at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, they will go to bed. Very nice arrangement. Usually the meeting was taking place after dinner. The discussion will go on, and then the members dispersed and go to their respective home. And all the ladies, whole road, they were discussing. They discuss very seriously to understand. So they don't require any education. Simply by hearing, they become advanced. This is recommended. Just try to hear, hear, hear. Very nice process. Prabhupada also, he recommended that the best education a woman can get is if she knows how to cook nicely, how to serve the husband nicely, cleaning and sewing, taking care of the children, because these are the dharmic duties of a woman. And if she knows these things, then she has a proper type of education. In 1911, I was 13 years old. There was a riot. Our house was there in Mahatma Gandhi Road, and all sides Mohammedans. The muluks and our house are simply some respectable men. Otherwise, it was surrounded by Kala Bagan Basti, all Mohammedans. Backside, fully Mohammedans. So the riot was there, and I went to play. There is a square, Market Square. I did not know the riot had taken place. I was coming home. One of my class friends said, "Do not go to your house. That side is rioting now." Because we are in the Muslim quarter, this fighting between two parties, that was going on. It is usual. I thought it may be like that two gundas are fighting. I've seen. One gunda is stabbing the other gunda. I have seen. And they are pickpockets. When you're passing, I have seen he is pickpocketing. And they were our neighbor men. So I thought it must be like that. This is going on. But when I came to the crossing of Harrison Road and Holiday Street, one shop was being plundered. I was a boy. I became, what is this happening? In the meantime, all my father, mother, members, oh, the child has not come. They became so mad. They came out of home expecting, where from the child will come? So what could I do? When I saw, then I began to run towards our house. And one Mohammedan, he wanted to kill me. He took his lati, but I passed through some way or other. I was saved. As soon as I came before our gate, they got their life. Without speaking anything, I went to the bedroom, and it was winter. So without saying anything, I laid down, wrapping myself with quilt. At that time, I was rising. Is it ending? The riot is ending? I was asking. I remember. I would have been killed in that riot. I've got experience of this riot. This is the first riot in Calcutta in 1911. Unless Krishna saves, who can? So I had the experience of riot in Calcutta in my childhood. Victoria Memorial, that was built in memory of Victoria. It was done imitating the Taj Mahal. You see how the four minarets are there, just like Taj Mahal. It took 20 years. Sir Rajendranath Mukherjee of Martin Company, he took the contract. After finishing, he got this title, Sir. And when it was being constructed, I went to the top by crossing the scaffolding. Brahmananda, so you must have been very brave. Prabhupada, yes, I am still brave. Otherwise, how could I come alone to preach Krishna consciousness? I am still brave. Devotees, Jai Srila Prabhupada. I learned English in Calcutta. I was educated in Scottish Churches College. My professors were all Europeans. In our time, Dr. Watt was principal, and I was student of philosophy of Dr. W.S. Urquhart. He was my professor, and our English professor was Mr. Cameron, Mr. Scrimgeour, Mr. Warren, and I was student of economics also. One Mr. Kidd. All our professors were Scotsmen, Englishmen. Tamal Krishna. He was a good professor, he was a good man. Prabhupada, oh yes. Tamal Krishna, they were a little strict. Prabhupada, no, they were very good gentlemen. Dr. Urquhart was a godly man. He was so nice. Satsvarup, isn't he the one who said the woman's brain is 32? Yes, Prabhupada said, yes, I remember. He told the woman's brain 34 ounce, man's brain up to 64 ounce. He was a very saintly man. And before that, there was one principal, Mr. Watt. He was the roughest man. He'd fight with the students like Gunda. But he was a very good manager, principal. So you see here now, if you look at the faculty, it's all Indians. But at that time, the Scottish church would send all of the priests, and they were the teachers of the Indian students. Our one English professor in our BA class, Mr. Cameron, he was Scotsman. At that time, Patel's bill, intercaste marriage. We were young men, we were supporting. So before the professor's coming, in the blackboard we wrote Patel's bill in Bengali. Professor Cameron came and saw. The boys, they had written something. He simply read it, remained silent. Then he began his teaching. Then when the hour is over, he erased the blackboard and he wrote in this way and read it. The purport is that when you'll pass your BA examination, then you'll be allowed to marry. Now you don't talk of this Patel's bill. So he was just encouraging the students, don't worry about getting married now, you're still students. And don't worry about this bill for intercaste marriage. So we clapped, and it was very nice, Mr. Cameron. There was our First Temple president, Dhananjaya. He was a Scotsman, Scottish. So Prabhupada was very affectionate to him. And it so happened that these Scottish priests, it was they who went to Manipur and converted so many of the Vaishnavas, because Manipur was a Vaishnav state. But the Scottish priests went there and converted so many of them into Christianity. So Prabhupada, he gave Dhananjaya, he told him, I want you to go to Manipur, and I want you to preach to these people and make them into Vaishnavas again. And Dhananjaya, he thought, oh, just because I'm Scottish, he's blaming it on me that the Scottish people went there and made all of the people into Christians. So he's sending me there to undo what they did. And you'll notice Prabhupada spoke very, very elevated English, better than most English-speaking people speak, because he was trained by these English and Scottish teachers. Satru, did they try to make you Christian like that? Prabhupada, no. There was Bible class, compulsory, half an hour from 1 to 1:30. They used to supply yearly one Bible, very nice. Tamal Krishna, free. But no one became Christians. Prabhupada laughs, no one. Some were, not all. And the Mohammedans, they could not convert any gentleman to Mohammedanism. Maybe one or two, say. And similarly, Christian also. No high-class man became Christian. One or two, that is for some other purpose. Just like in Scottish Church's college, the Christian Indians were given more preference. That's one of the reasons why they became Christians. They would get more preference. There was one Mr. Roy. He would not speak in Bengali. Even if some Bengali student would like to talk with him in Bengali, he would answer in English. He was so sharp. So that's why when Prabhupada would lecture, and sometimes the Christians would challenge Prabhupada, he knew the Bible very well because he had compulsory Bible study in his college. And not only that, he knew the similarities between Lord Jesus Christ's teachings and the Vedic teachings. And therefore, when he went to places such as in Melbourne, he was invited to a big seminary there where the St. Francis Fathers all lived. And they welcomed him, they gave him standing ovation because he was able to show them that it's the same God. We're doing the same thing. Just according to time and circumstances, the teachings were given at a different place by a different person. So he understood the Christian philosophy, and therefore he was able to, within our ISKCON, a sociological study was made. And amongst all the devotees who joined around the world, it was found out that the majority, the highest percentage of the Western devotees who joined came from Catholic families, because the Catholics have a personal concept of God as Jesus Christ. After that was the Jewish, because that also Judeo-Christian is the same teachings to some extent. So this similarity between the different religions, because Prabhupada had such a good foundation in his college, he was able to preach to the Christians very successfully. I was married in 1918 during student time. I was at that time third-year student. In 1921, my first child was born. Of course, I took up this missionary idea as soon as I saw him, his Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, in 1922, because we were trained up to some extent by our family tradition. One of my friends took me to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in 1922. At that time, I could understand that here is a person who is actually doing the missionary activities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because we were Vaishnava family, my father was Vaishnava, my grandfather was Vaishnava, we were all worshipers of Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya by family tradition, I could understand that here is a saintly person who is trying very nicely. So he asked me to join immediately, but I was family man. So I was thinking, how to do. My marriage was already settled. One day I was going in cycle, and my father-in-law forcibly took me. My wife was 11 years old. My mother-in-law was married at 7 years, and my father-in-law was 11 years. Yarubara, what about your family after you were married? Prabhupada, I have got sons. They're still there in Calcutta. A sannyasi does not require the history of his previous life. So summary I have already given. So Srila Prabhupada had 3 sons. One was Prayagraj. The eldest was Mathura Mohan, then Prayagraj, and Vrindavan Chandra. So he named it after the 3 holy places, his sons, Mathura, Vrindavan, and Prayag. Of the 3 of them, the youngest one, Vrindavan Chandra, he tried to assist Prabhupada within ISKCON. He's still active within ISKCON. His family all became devotees. His daughter was initiated. Other than that, the other family members did not take active part. I was married when my wife was only 11 years old, and at the age of 14 years, she gave birth to first child. And in next generation, when my eldest daughter was married at the age of 16 years, it is little increased. But I was also very much upset that the daughter is 16 years old. But now things have changed. Nobody cares whether the daughter is married or not, but that is not good. Formerly also, in our childhood, a woman having no sufficient ornaments, she will be ashamed to go to the society. Oh, others will think me so much poor. I will not go. I'll never go. Therefore, I was surprised when I came to your country. I saw young girls and ladies, they have no bangles, no ornaments. At least I was surprised. And smoking cigarettes. What is this opulence? Practically, I'll say, in our childhood age, my sisters were married between 9 to 12 years. My eldest sister was married when she was 9 years old, before my birth. And my second sister was married at the age of 12 years. And my third sister was married at the age of 11 years. So by the 12 years, the marriage must be finished. That was the duty of the father. Prabhupada describes this in the Srimad Bhagavatam, how it's the duty of the father to marry the girl before she attains adolescence. I remember because my second sister was going 12 years, my mother said to my father that I shall go to the river and commit suicide. The daughter is not married. You see, the father was very sorry. Yes, I'm trying. What can I do? In 1920, I gave up my educational career and joined this Congress movement. At that time, I was Gandhi's devotee. Because Gandhi's program was to boycott the university education and the British law court, we took this opportunity and gave up education. Dr. Bose was my father's close friend. He is the starter of Bengal Chemical Company. He asked, "What is this Abai doing?" My sister told him, "He has appeared in the BA examination, but he's not doing anything." So he appointed me the manager of his laboratory for this relationship. We were exactly like son. I did not know anything. Still, he appointed me. That was in 1921. Electricity was introduced in our life when we were 10, 12 years old. Before that, there was no electricity and there were no motor car. No, the tram car was drawn by horses in Calcutta. With my father, I used to walk 10 miles to save a ticket of 5 paisa on the tram car. We are trained up in that way. Of course, it was a very pleasant morning walk. Happy. That is wanted. Happiness in whatever circumstance. Not that because we did not possess a motor car, therefore unhappy. I purchased one motor car in 1925, Buick car. Not for personal use, but for using it as a taxi. My one nephew, he was a good driver. So my father, why don't you give him? He can do that and we can use it, our own car, also taxi. So I took it, Buick car. I think I paid 8,000 rupees. Buick, yes, very strong car. At that time, Ford, Chevrolet, and Buick. These cars were very popular in India. Ford for the poorer class, and Buick for the first class. So when Prabhupada grew up, the trams, the trolley cars, they were pulled by the horses. And then they laid down the tracks for the electric trams. And above the tracks was the wire when the electricity was installed. So though Prabhupada was very small, he would see these electric trams going and they were touching the wires on the top. So he thought, I'll just stand on the track and I'll get a stick and I'll touch the wires and I'll be able to move just like the trolley is moving. Because they couldn't understand how the trolley was moving without any horses. In 1922, I met my Guru Maharaj. I was born in a Vaishnava family, so by the grace of Krishna, from the very beginning of my life, I was Krishna conscious by family tradition and my father's caretaking. In 1933, I was officially initiated. Then Guru Maharaj passed away in 1936. 15 days before his passing away, he asked me, "You preach in English language in the Western countries. That will be your good, and the person amongst whom you preach, they will also be benefited." This was his last instruction to me. He passed away on December 30th, and that letter was written 13th December, 1936. In 1923, I resigned that post at Bose Laboratory. I was appointed their agent for Northern India. Then my business flourished like anything. I started my own laboratory in Lucknow, in Varanasi, in Allahabad. So that was very successful business. Everyone knew me in the chemical business. Now you see the dates here. Prabhupada was initiated, he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in 1922. Just by the inspiration of meeting Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he decided to resign from his job and dedicate himself to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's mission. But Mr. Bose, he explained to Prabhupada, you're a family man, you're married, you already have a child, you can't give up your family, you just started your family life. So, all right, if you want to resign, that's okay, but you become my representative, and you can travel, you can do your preaching, and at the same time you can make money to maintain your family. So that's why in 1923, he left his post as manager in Calcutta, and he was sent by Dr. Bose to open up all over northern India the laboratories. In this way, gradually, I came in contact intimately. In 1935, all my godbrothers were meeting in Bombay. I was living outside the mutt. They requested, Abhay Babu is such a noble soul, why he should live outside the mutt? Purposely, I was living outside. I had my business office. I was living with my 4 children. Family was in Calcutta. So Guru Maharaj said, it is better to live a little outside, and he will do the necessity automatically in due course of time. He said like that. So I could not understand what he meant by that. But it means that he was confident that this boy in due course of time will take up this matter seriously. He said these very words, in due course of time, he will take things rightly, and it is better now to live a little apart from. Then in 1936, he passed away, and he left his letter. You do this. So I was thinking, What shall I do? Devotees would go to pilgrimages by walking to Navadvip or Vrindavan. He would make his will because he does not know whether he'll come back or not. Long distance, 1,000 miles you have to go on leg. So they were advertising that no, now you'll not have to walk. The East India Company, they're making very easygoing railway. Their idea was to draw all the raw materials from villages and send it to England. Now you can go to Tirtha by nice railway. And they thought, oh, how beneficial the English, British company. They're giving us so much facility. I was consulting the timetable. What is the fare of Jagannath Puri and Vrindavan? Jagannath Puri at that time was 4 rupees from Calcutta, and Vrindavan was 6 rupees. So I was dreaming, when I get this 4 rupees or 6 rupees, he was planning where to go first. Finally, he decided to go to Jagannath Puri, and he was married then when he went, and his wife was worried that he'll go and then he won't come back, and people were also frightening her like that, oh, now he's gone, he might not come back. So one time we were sitting with Prabhupada in Mayapur, in his room, and Prabhupada, he had the perfect understanding of the British mentality. He said that these railways destroyed the country of India, because from the railways, they were able to enter into the villages where everything was very, very cheap, the grains, the cotton, the vegetables, and bring it to the cities and import it to England, because England had nothing. They couldn't grow anything. All they had was potatoes. So in that way, they took all of the wealth of the villages, and not only the wealth, but they took the young boys, the men, because the men in the villages, they didn't need money. They grew everything they needed. All they needed maybe was some soap or some salt. These were the only things that they couldn't grow. So money wasn't a requirement in the villages. But with these trains, now these village boys, they could come into the cities and they can get jobs in the cities and make a lot of rupees. But they didn't realize that it was a trick, because when you make the money, just to live in the cities, and the cities were so miserable, they were like hell. So to live in the cities, you started to eat meat, and it was so miserable, then you started to take intoxication, and all of your money would be wasted just by living in the cities. So that way, all the manpower was drawn out of the villages into the cities to run the big factories of the British. And then the British, they introduced, Prabhupada explained all this, mass production. He said previously, if you needed a knife, you go to the smithy, like they have on the roads here, and he makes a knife for you, and it lasts your whole lifetime. The knife is so sturdy. But with mass production, they make thousands of knives, and the knife is useless after 1 year. And then you have to buy another knife, and another knife, and another knife. That way they pulled all the men to work in their factories. The men were then caught in the cities, and that's why all these slums were developed in the big cities like Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta. Before, all of those people lived in the villages. So Prabhupada said that this was the cause of the downfall of India, when the British made these railway systems. Up to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, my father was engaged only with his puja. He was going late at 12 o'clock to bed. He used to rise a little late at about 7, 8, then taking baths, sometimes purchasing. Then from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, he was engaged in puja. Then he would take his lunch and go to business. And in the business shop, he was taking a little rest for 1 hour. He'd come from business at 10 o'clock at night, and then again puja, regularly. Actually, his business was puja. We were sleeping. Father was doing arti. Ding, 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 ding. Then he would take at night some puris or paratha. He was also fond of puffed rice. In later age, he was simply taking puffed rice and milk. So anyway, puja was his main business. So this is also Prabhupada's daily practice. Prabhupada, at nighttime, after he would give his lecture here in the temple, wherever he was, he would come to his room and he would have hot milk, and along with it, he would have either muri or paratha or kachori, something, just like his father used to have when he would come home from his work at night. Then he would take maybe just an hour and a half of rest, and the whole night, Prabhupada would then be translating while we all slept. We cannot work unless we derive some pleasure. The butchers I have seen in Calcutta, I was passing through. One hotel man was cutting the throat of a chicken, and the chicken, after being cut, the throat, it was jumping like anything. You see, and he was laughing. He was taking pleasure. It was for me so horrible, but he was taking very nice pleasure. This half-cut chicken is jumping. And his son was crying. And he was asking, "Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" So it is the question of different qualities. One is attracted, and one he finds that they are detracted. Prabhupada's explaining the different modes of nature. For the Vaishnava, for one in the mode of goodness, they're horrified to see such a thing. And then this butcher, he's taking pleasure, because when you cut off the neck of a chicken, the nerves are still moving, although the head is gone, so the chicken is still jumping around, and he's enjoying that, laughing. When Ajamil was just on the point of death, naturally, he had affection for his son. So he was calling, "Narayan, Narayan, Narayan, please come here, please come here." That is natural. I know my father when he was dying, so I was not at home. So he lived for one day to see me. He was always inquiring whether Abai has come back, like that. So by the paternal affection, he showed that. Similarly, Ajamil was also calling, "Narayan, Narayan." When my eldest son was only 2 years and a half, he was trying to catch the table fan. This is when there was electricity. The table fan was moving, so I was requesting, "No, don't touch." But he insisted, as child. So one of my friends was sitting. He said that, "Make it slow and allow him to touch it." So I did it, and the child touched it, and there was in the finger tang. Then I asked him to again touch. No, no. So sometimes we learn that way. Now this is another thing that the British did. It was wartime, and they needed men to join the army to fight against the Germans and the Japanese. And because India, already there was cooperation, we heard before that food and clothing are the two most important things, two necessities. So what they did was, they broke all of the fishing boats so that nobody could fish anymore. They couldn't get fish. And they took all of the grains from the villages, everything there was, and they took those grains and kept them only for the army and to send to England. So only if you were a soldier in the army were you able to get any food. And the rest of the people starved to death. This is the beginning of the war. In 1942, there was a manufactured famine in Bengal by the manipulation of the then government. It is for the first time we experienced that in India. See, there was plenty of food. Oh, cloth. They also took cloth. Nobody could get any cloth to wear. They were naked because they took all that cloth and they sent it to England. So many people were in difficulty, and so many people died for want of food. When there's no food, naturally there's disease and famine. But you will be surprised. Persons who were in our line, engaged in devotional service, they were not in difficulty even in the famine circumstances. In my family life at that time, I had some responsibility. Myself, my wife, my 5 children, servant, and so many, about 10 people. And I was purchasing rice. Management was going on. Those who were in some way or other in touch with the devotional service, I inquired from them individually, and I was satisfied that even from the villages, I inquired, "Were you in difficulty?" They replied, "No, we have no difficulty. Some way or other we are managing." So this is practical. Anyone who is engaged in devotional service, whose life is dedicated for service of the Supreme, you will see practically that there will be no want, there will be no unhappiness. This is a fact. Now we have this also in present day. So many wars are going on. Like for instance, there was a big war in Sarajevo, that's in Eastern Europe. There was no food, the people couldn't even go out, they couldn't get water. But somehow or other, devotees were distributing prasadam to all the people. And the devotees were able to do that in many difficult circumstances. Somehow or other, Krishna sends so that they can prepare prasadam and feed all the people who are suffering. During the Bangladeshi war also, they were able to provide for all the refugees. And it was very much appreciated by the local people. But the government didn't appreciate it because the devotees were getting the credit and not the government. In 1944, I started this Back to Godhead. I was practically distributing, spending in those days 300 rupees, 400 rupees. It was a large amount, but I was spending somehow or other from my business, and practically it was being distributed. In this way, gradually things changed. I wanted to become a very big businessman and earn money and spend for this missionary work, but that was not very successful. So in 1950, I retired practically. Not retired, but little in touch with business. Whatever is going on, going on. He had his sons look after the business. Then in 1954, I gave up connection with my family. I went to Jhansi. Prabhupada went to Jhansi because when he was traveling as representative of the Bose lavatories, he would visit Jhansi, and there were doctors there. And he would hold preaching programs, and they were very enthusiastic, and they particularly invited Prabhupada, "Why don't you start a center in Jhansi, because we all want to become students of yours." So there I got a very big building. I wanted to start the missionary activities under the name of the League of Devotees. It was registered. That was a very nice building. Somebody gave me. Just a minute. Oh, we're missing one. Okay. They chant. By chanting, by hearing, they learn ABC, like that. 2 + 2 = 4. We did it in our childhood. One boy chants like that. 2 + 2 = 4. And we shall repeat. 2 + 2 = 4. So repeating 3 times, I understand 2 + 2 = 4. And English education, they wanted to conduct their office affairs. They required some clerk. They did not want any highly educated. Work here, ABCD, that's all, bas. And as soon as you learn very good, you get 50 rupees salary. So Gandhi discovered, and the discovery was that they're exploiting us, so non-cooperate. They are ruling over us by our cooperation, so let us non-cooperate. But that is a foolish policy. Poverty-stricken country, how they can non-cooperate? That was not successful. So you understand the mentality. They would educate just enough so that the people could serve within the English companies. And that was all, and then they'd get a good salary. So that way, the poor Indian people would get a salary and serve the English companies, and that way the English companies were able to prosper. So Gandhi said, stop cooperating. Don't work in the companies, don't do the education, don't be the soldier. But Prabhupada said, no, that didn't work. Oh, anyway. This Indian National Army at least made a show of attack from Imphal. Especially on Calcutta, dropped bombs, and the whole Calcutta became vacant. Perhaps myself and a few others remained. I sent my sons. Of course, daughter was married, but they sent to Navadvip, Sridhar Maharaj's ashram. My wife refused to go out of Calcutta. She said, I'll be bombed maybe, but I'll not go out. Laughs. So I had to remain in Calcutta. So I've seen bombing, and Calcutta all vacant. One day I was eating in the evening, at night, immediately bombing. Kachori, I was hungry, but the eating finished, almost daily, but it was meant for bombing the European quarters. The downtown will be first finished. Almost all the bombs were thrown in downtown. That is from my childhood. I am fond of kachori. Kachori is made first class in Agra and Mathura. Very, very nice. And then Prabhupada loved kachoris. Prabhupada was in Hawaii, this happened. Prabhupada, not making kachori? Bali Mardan. You have not asked for it. Prabhupada, well, I have to ask for it. You had to be ready to make kachoris anytime Prabhupada wanted, even if he didn't ask. But this, so you have to understand, this INA, they were bombing India, but they were bombing where the English lived, and that was Calcutta. This program, Subhash Bose's tit for tat, military, that was success. They're keeping our men as soldiers and police, and by their strength, they're ruling over India. And Subhash Bose made a plan. The soldiers and police will not cooperate. They'll join his INA. And when they began to join Indian National Army, these intelligent Britishers could understand. Now it is no more possible. With whose cooperation we shall kick. Then they made a friendly settlement. Friendly means divided so that they'll perpetually fight and let us go. We can see that's still going on. Tamal Krishna Maharaj. It seems like that division was simply spiteful. Prabhupada. That is politics. There was no purpose to it. No. What did England gain from the separation? Gain means they are now finished. They have gained this. They have no prestige, no money, because India was the crown jewel of the British Empire. When they lost India, they lost their prestige, they lost everything. But what was their gain from dividing India and Pakistan? And Prabhupada knew the answer. Just spiteful enviousness. And to this day, India and Pakistan are still fighting as a result. Because the Indians, they were, even after when they got out the British, the simple Indian people, Prabhupada was explaining, because under the British, at least there was some management. So when it was time for the first elections, they were asking, can we vote for the British? Because at least they would have some management then. They couldn't understand that what the British had actually done to the country. And the Indians, they asked the British, how should we divide? So the British took the two wealthiest parts away from India, which was West Pakistan and East Pakistan, and that way there was always fighting. Anyone can go to the moon planet. For that you have to prepare in a different way. Not that you get a small tricycle and go to the moon. That is foolishness. So in our childhood also we were imagining, I've got this tricycle. I shall go to Europe. I shall go to the West. It is like that. By the force of time, just in due course of time, everything, whatever you require, it will come. Just like I was talking to you, that in my childhood we heard so much about London City. So I was desiring, when shall I go to London? Now in due course of time, I am walking in London. So Krishna has provided everything for you. Don't worry. Therefore, our main business should be how to develop Krishna consciousness. We should not bother about other things. This is Prabhupada when he was first in London. There's Shyam Sundar there with him. And you can tell it's London because in London they have these double-decker trams. You'll be glad to know that even in my young age or early age, it was Krishna's grace. Even amongst my young friends, I was considered the leader. In my school days, in my college days, in my private friendship, some way or other, I became their leader. And one astrologer, sometimes he read my hands. He said, your hand speaks that your order will be executed. So that's Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.